The latest update, America's B-52 bomber has now officially entered Iranian territory. So what major signal does this represent? This is the first topic I'll be discussing with everyone today. In addition, France, Spain, and Italy have all prohibited American military aircraft from engaging in operations related to Iran. Combat military aircraft are not allowed to land. So what does this mean? Let me explain it to everyone first. The conclusion is that the United States and Europe are beginning to move toward a real split. Is this really the case? And how will this affect the global landscape going forward? This is also what I want to discuss with you today. Another topic is the so-called major business migration happening in the United States, particularly in places like Lanzhou. Especially when it comes to Wall Street, will the entire Wall Street become a Texas Wall Street, or will it remain New York's Wall Street? This is also an important topic I want to bring to everyone today. Welcome to Listen and Watch. This is Fang Wei, bringing you the Good Morning America program. Greetings to our YouTube viewers. Hello, friends of Hope Radio. Hello, listeners of Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Let's dive into the latest updates on this morning's news. So, last night Trump posted that the United States attacked a key defense industrial city in central Iran, an important national defense industrial city. The bunker buster bombs in Isfahan triggered a chain reaction resulting in a series of explosions. The fireballs were enormous, clearly indicating that a major Iranian munitions depot was hit. Then, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, and Secretary of Defense Hagerthes held a joint press conference at 8 o'clock this morning. Every few days, the two of them come together for a joint appearance like this. So, what is the latest news being announced to the entire nation here? Of course, the reporters asked a lot of questions. The first question was, namely, have ground troops already arrived, and will they be deployed? Hagerthes gave a very Trump-like answer. We are not ruling out any options. In other words, he didn't say anything concrete at all. However, U.S. ground troops have indeed already arrived. So what about the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit? They have now fully arrived. And the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit? Departing from San Diego, now they are coming from the Western Pacific, currently on the Arabian Sea, and will arrive very soon. Some units of the Paratrooper Division have already arrived there. In addition, the Department of Defense is also mobilizing another 10,000 U.S. troops to head to the Middle East. As for the United States, everyone knows that the U.S. Air Force has been continuously entering Iran. They rely on two things to protect themselves. The first is flying at extremely high speeds. The second is stealth. Whether it's the B-22 or the B-35 bombers, they are all stealth bombers. Radar cannot detect them. Later on, the B-1 and B-2 were also used, both possessing significant stealth or high-speed characteristics. However, today, the Pentagon stated that the United States has already called the B-52 the stratofortress. Bombers were deployed over Iran. This is part of the current operation in Iran. This is the first time since the operation called Epic Rage. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, said, the United States and Israel have already destroyed about half of Iran's air combat capability to this extent. To such an extent that these heavy bombers can now fly safely in this region and carry out missions. What does this mean? This so-called B-52 was developed in 1952 and was equipped by the U.S. military in 1955. Up to now, it has been in service for 71 years. It's already an old aircraft. It was even going to be retired before, but for some reason, it wasn't phased out in the end. But anyway, it has undergone some upgrades and modernization, at least partially, to improve it. However, this aircraft is called the Fortress. This model of bomber is a heavy bomber. Its main feature is, or rather its drawback is that, first of all, it doesn't fly fast. Second, it doesn't have stealth capabilities. Its aircraft coating can't prevent it from being detected by radar. So if such a plane can get through, it shows that Iran's air defense capabilities have already been completely reduced to zero for such a situation to occur. Of course, its payload, that is the weight it can carry, is extremely high. So if it can get in, its operational efficiency, its bombing efficiency is especially high. This is the U.S. Air Force. Now, this is an important turning point in bombing, indicating that they are gradually achieving greater and greater victories. And then, as for the Secretary of Defense, Haig, or maybe called the Security Secretary, no, not security, the Minister, the Secretary of War, Haig said that the intelligence agency reported that the current military strikes are weakening. The morale of the Iranian military is being undermined, leading to large-scale desertions. There is a shortage of personnel in key positions, which has left the senior leadership feeling extremely frustrated. Last night, I saw a post on X. The post talked about an Iranian soldier who covered his own face, even blurring it out with a mosaic. Then, while speaking, he said that there was no one left in the barracks. All my comrades have fled. Even my officer has run away. We've been here for so long. There haven't been any instructions or orders at all. The only thing we've been told is to wait. Wait for what? He said, right now it's best if we surrender as soon as possible. So now, Whatever we have left, we should keep it. Otherwise, in the end, we might be left with nothing at all. But this action, it just confirms what I've told everyone before about these situations. In 2008, Iran began to implement what they called the Mosaic Principle. That is to say, if we go to war with the United States, it's very easy for us to be decapitated, even before the decapitation happens. So we break up into smaller units, and then after the decapitation, everyone acts independently. This is the current situation. In this scenario, because you don't have a command system, in short, you just don't have one. No one knows who the leader is. When you break up into smaller combat units, each one acts on its own. It's like an army with no one in charge. Over time, it just falls apart. So this is the situation that occurs. So Secretary of Defense Haig said that what we have now, our options are increasing while their options are decreasing. He said that in just 1 month, we have set the tone for the entire situation. We have set the tone, and the next few days will be crucial. He said Iran is also very aware of this, and they have almost no options left militarily. Hagel also said that last Saturday he made a so-called secret trip. He personally flew to a U.S. military base in the Middle East for an inspection. There, he encouraged the troops who are stationed and fighting there. You are just like our brothers, the best in the world. He personally went to the front lines to encourage the soldiers, and then, when asked by reporters, pay attention to this, everyone, pay close attention. Regarding reports about the CCP and Russia aiding Iran, Hagel said the following. He said, regarding Russia and China, we are very clear about what they are doing and what they have or have not done. Right now, there is no need to lay all our cards on the table. When necessary, we will handle it, or rather, we will respond directly and head on. All right, so what does that mean? Indeed, there have been many recent reports, including from the Wall Street Journal, which reported that they were the first to report that Russia is providing intelligence to Iran. And another source said that the Chinese Communist Party has also been providing information about the US military to Iran, their military and equipment locations and coordinates. An anonymous intelligence source revealed that this intelligence mainly comes from geospatial data provided by Chinese Communist Party satellites. This is called geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt. As for intelligence sharing, it is not happening during what is called Operation Wrath of Epic. It did not happen right at the start of the operation, but rather after the war, roughly between 10 and 14 days later, starting from March 10th. That's when the Chinese Communist Party began providing intelligence to Iran. At present, it is still unclear whether any American soldiers have been affected as a result of the intelligence provided by the CCP, whether there were deaths or injuries, because the most recent incident involving the deaths of US soldiers occurred on March 12th. At that time, at least 13 American soldiers were in Western Iraq, this escalation. So it's not an escalation, but rather casualties. So what exactly is going on here? Clearly, the Trump administration knows very well, but they're not saying it publicly. So that's something everyone should be aware of. From this kind of situation, you can tell what attitude this government, the Trump administration, has. What is their attitude toward the Chinese Communist Party? Right now, they're not even tearing off the mask. They're even going over to visit the CCP. Of course, some say that the reason Trump postponed his visit was also because he was unhappy about this. From the end of March, originally it was scheduled for the end of March or the beginning of April, in April. The April Fool's Day visit to China was changed to May 14th to 15th. Of course, whether or not the visit was postponed because of this, I don't think so. However, as for what the CCP is really like, Trump's administration and his team, I believe, know very clearly. It's just that now is not yet the time to confront them head on. All right, the next piece of news is also the main topic I want to talk to everyone about today is very important. It concerns France, Spain, and Italy. What consequences will it bring if these three countries do not allow American military planes to land? First, let's talk about the tweet President Trump posted last night. He said that France, this country, actually refused to allow planes fully loaded with military equipment and heading to Israel for attacks, but to fly through French airspace. France has been extremely uncooperative when it comes to dealing with the Iranian butcher. And now this Iranian butcher has already been successfully eliminated. The United States will remember this. As you can see, the USA will remember. Okay. Then Israel responded, saying that French President Macron decided not to allow American planes to fly over French airspace en route to Israel. This has now become the last straw that broke the camel's back. So now Israel has cut off its military procurement ties with France and has already decided to cancel them. All security purchases from France, and from now on, they will no longer procure anything from France, whether it's defense and security weapons or equipment. But these words are just a statement. In reality, France, in 1967, the Six-Day War broke out in the Middle East. In that year, 1967, before that, France was Israel's largest arms supplier. At that time, France was even the only arms supplier for the Israeli Air Force. Back then, the main fighter jet was a type called the Mirage fighter. But after the Six-Day War, France imposed an arms embargo on Israel. It was one of those things done by the Western leftists. So what was the result? Well, after that, Israel shifted significantly toward the United States. And now this, the military aid or arms business between the United States and Israel is worth tens of billions of dollars. As for France, Israel only buys a very small amount of equipment from them. Including spare parts, it's only about $10 to $20 million a year, so it can basically be ignored. But Israel making this statement basically means I'm not happy. In other words, I'm very displeased. This is the situation with France. Macron did indeed explicitly prohibit American warplanes flying to the Middle East from stopping over at US Air Force bases in France. Now, in addition, let me tell you about something else, which is the situation in Italy. According to reports from Italy's Corriere della Sera and La Repubblica, on March 27th, last Friday, the Chief of Staff of the Italian Ministry of Defense received a notification that the United States had several bombers loaded with bombs. So they planned to land at a place in Sicily called a naval air station, a naval air base called Sigonella, and then continue flying to the Middle East to participate in military operations against Iran. However, the US side did not request authorization in advance or coordinate with the Italian military. It was only when the plane was about to arrive that they notified the Italian side, saying, "We're coming." As a result, the chief of the defense staff reported this matter to the Minister of Defense, whose name is Crosetto. After the two of them discussed it, they concluded that this was not a routine NATO operation, but rather participation in a war that Italy did not agree with. So they unanimously agreed to refuse permission for the American plane to land at Sigonella. The reason given was a lack of authorization and prior consultation. Actually, this kind of incident has happened before in history. Once, back in 1985, terrorists from the PLO hijacked a cruise ship. This cruise ship was called the Achille Lauro. So, after the cruise ship incident was over, these terrorists later tried to escape from Egypt by plane. They took off from Cairo flying toward Tunis, where the PLO headquarters was located. But President Reagan found out about this incident. At that time, citing a fuel emergency as the reason, he used this as a pretext to deploy American military aircraft. They forced this civilian plane, an Egyptair flight, to land at the same airport which was called at Sigonella Airport. Then American troops boarded the plane to arrest the suspects. As a result, the Italian President Craxi was only informed at the very last moment. He felt that this involved Italian sovereignty and had nothing to do with the treaty with the United States, so he intervened. At that time, there were 50 Italian police officers and soldiers present. They surrounded the plane and refused to let the Americans board to make the arrest. Then the American Delta Force formed an outer perimeter around them. The Italian police and soldiers created a very bizarre and extremely dramatic scene. In the end, President Reagan made a concession and ordered the US military to withdraw. However, the hijacker was handed over to the Italians. But indeed, Italy also charged him with the murder of a Jewish American. They were tried on this charge, and in the end, 4 people were convicted. This incident triggered what was called at the time a government and constitutional crisis in Italy. On one hand, it was about Italy's allies demanding an emergency landing. On the other hand, the Italian constitution stated that without parliamentary approval, it was not allowed. At that time, this almost led to the collapse of the government. But in the end, it still went through, it still passed. At that time, the government managed to get through, and in the end, it led to the constitutional amendment. What does this amendment mean? It actually grants the Italian Prime Minister more authority. It gives more power to make such decisions in emergency situations. So that's the situation. Now, what Italy did this time happened last Friday. As everyone has seen so far, the United States hasn't reacted, and Trump hasn't reacted either. I guess it's probably because it doesn't have a direct connection to Meloni. It was a decision made by the Italian military, according to Italian law. The centrist and left-wing parties in Italy, which support the right, have not made any statements. Okay, so although I think Trump is definitely unhappy about this, there's no doubt about it, he hasn't said anything. Now, the next thing. Trump, on the other hand, was not so polite. This happened just yesterday. Yesterday, March 30th, that's according to Spanish time. The Spanish government explicitly closed its airspace, prohibiting involvement in the war with Iran. Relevant American and Israeli military aircraft were not allowed to fly over Spanish airspace. Not just the bases, even the airspace itself was off-limits to US military bases. Just like France, this also included American planes taking off from third countries such as the UK and France. Wow, this decision was made by their defense minister, whose name is Rabos. He publicly confirmed that we would neither approve the use of military bases nor approve the use of our airspace for any actions related to the war against Iran. As for the Spanish Prime Minister, whose name is Sanchez, he described this war as illegal and unreasonable, and also dangerous. He insisted that the use of bases and airspace must comply with international law. Okay, so what was the result of this statement from Spain? It led to at least 15 American planes, including refueling aircraft, being withdrawn from the Rota and Moran bases. This forced American military aircraft to change their routes, increasing the complexity of logistics. But more importantly, it made President Trump feel extremely displeased. President Trump then publicly and strongly responded, saying, "Italy, terrible," and threatened to cut off all trade with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain. He also instructed Treasury Secretary Vicente to cease all dealings with Madrid. At the same time, President Trump instructed the United States to state that America does not need Spain's permission. They could use this base whenever necessary, even on schedule if needed. They could just fly in directly, and that would be it. Trump criticized Spain for wanting a free ride. He said that while Spain needs the United States for NATO defense, it refuses to provide support when the US needs it. The US spokesperson also made a very strong statement saying that Spain and other NATO allies, their actions are very disappointing, and he specifically called them out. Spain said it refused to provide bases and airspace. They even openly bragged about this, denying us the use of the airspace and bragging about it. The spokesperson warned that after the war, the United States would re-examine the value and arrangements of NATO. He questioned if NATO only expects us to defend them when Europe is under attack, but when we need them, they refuse to provide bases. Then that's not a good arrangement. Lubo said that NATO's value to the United States lies in providing emergency bases. Right now, that's basically its only value. But this kind of one-sided relationship, the United States must reassess what benefit such an arrangement brings to America. So what will be the outcome? We'll talk about that in a moment. But at the same time, Trump also addressed another issue, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. On this issue, Trump made a clear statement. He wants without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. What does it mean to end the war with Iran without reopening the Strait of Hormuz? Trump tweeted about this earlier this morning. He said that all these countries that can't get airplanes because of the Strait of Hormuz, countries that can't get fuel. For example, he specifically mentioned the UK, saying that the UK refused to participate in the decapitation operation against Iran. So let me give you a suggestion. First, buy oil from us, the United States. We have plenty of oil. Second, muster up some belated courage and go to the Strait of Hormuz to get the oil yourselves. You can see that when Trump speaks, he really is very straightforward, without any political overtones. He said, and everyone needs to listen to this next sentence. You must start learning how to fight for yourselves. America will no longer help you the way we did in the past, just like you didn't help us before. Iran has basically already been severely hit. The most difficult things have already happened. We've already finished our part. Go get your own oil yourselves. How does everyone feel about this? Leave a comment. How about that? Leave a comment, friends who are watching us right now. U.S. Secretary of Defense Haig says, at this morning's Tuesday press conference, he also did not mention reopening. The Strait of Hormuz is the core target of the U.S. in what is called Operation Epic Fury. The U.S. has repeatedly stated this over and over again. The core objectives are threefold: eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities, destroy its ballistic missiles and its manufacturing capabilities, as well as destroy Iran's Navy and Air Force. These are the three main objectives. So at this Pentagon press conference, Haig Sayers was asked about it. When it came to the Strait of Hormuz, he reiterated that the Strait of Hormuz is not just an issue for the United States. He called on European countries to take responsibility themselves. You all might need to start learning how to fight for yourselves. He said the same thing, just like Trump. So this is the view of the entire Trump team. So how should we interpret this? How should we understand Europe's actions and Trump's statements? This is what I want to focus on analyzing for everyone next. Before that, let me talk about something more personal to us, our own health. Recently, we've received feedback from viewers after taking Red Sea Cucumber Health capsules. It really makes me want to share this with everyone. One of our viewers, Ms. Jin, who is 70 years old this year, has been experiencing pain in the right side of her liver. She would also easily develop neck pain. For a full 30 years, she saw countless specialists and underwent all kinds of tests, but no one could cure her. Last Christmas, with the mindset of there's no harm in giving it a try, she started eating Red Sea Cucumber. As a result, she said that in a very short period of time, the tightness in her liver was gone, the pain was relieved, and even her sleep improved. She said this product is truly a genuinely good thing. Absolutely right. Not only did she urgently need it herself, she even paid out of her own pocket to buy one for each of her family members back home. Oh my, giving the gift of health is actually better than giving anything else, isn't it? Of course, let me add a disclaimer here. This is a personal experience and results may vary from person to person. This product is a nutritional supplement, not a medicine. Feeling better does not constitute medical advice, and it should be used in accordance with your doctor's instructions. This red sea cucumber health supplement contains what is called sea cucumber saponin, collagen and mucopolysaccharides. Anyone who has been sick for a long time and become their own doctor knows these are good things. They help promote joint flexibility. They support the body's repair, help with recovery from fatigue, relieve tiredness, and can also help maintain immunity and cardiovascular health. So if there are elderly people at home, or if you yourself want to maintain your health on a daily basis, it's worth giving it a try. Now until April 12th, enter the promo code FANGWEI. You can enjoy a 15% discount, and if you order 60 pieces, you'll get a free pack of 30 deep yellow honey raw tablets and a sunscreen. All subscribers will also receive a $10 deep yellow voucher. If you order 60 pieces in mainland China, you'll receive a pack of deep yellow honey raw tablets and deep yellow black body, plus a deep yellow voucher worth $10. For more details, click on the promo code section below this video in the income area. That way you can get these great offers. Now, let me talk a bit about this, what's called the Europe and America going in opposite directions. The world order is very likely to be reshuffled. So, as we just discussed with everyone, this whole situation, all of these are things that have made Trump extremely angry, but regardless of this anger, what will happen next? Trump has already told his staff, he publicly told his staff, and even said at a press conference, that he is willing to end the war with Iran without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So where is the issue now? That is to say, why does the United States have to reopen the Strait of Hormuz? Or rather, everyone thinks that you, the United States, that Trump must reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, it would mean that you failed in the war with Iran because the global oil price would skyrocket. The United States absolutely has to worry about this, and the United States definitely will worry about it. So Europe has never needed to work hard. They just need to express their opinions, and that's enough. This is the normal state of the world. So what Trump really meant today is that the United States doesn't need to worry about it anymore. Okay, this attitude or this stance. This statement is the same as Trump's view on European defense. How dangerous is this world? The United States will definitely worry about it, and historically Europe never really had to. Right? Let me interpret this for Trump. In 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when it collapsed that year, West Germany, back then West Germany's army alone had 500,000 soldiers. Today, the whole of Germany combined only has 180,000. Why is that? Because they're under America's protection. The US acts as the world's police, setting up police stations everywhere, right? There are 80 US military bases in Europe, and just in Germany alone. There are 30 in Germany and 25 US military bases in the Middle East. This is just like the US as the world's police, having police stations all over the world. And then the US has 11 police cars patrolling everywhere. These are the 11 US aircraft carrier battle groups. The United States is the world's police. Everyone thinks that this world, do we need police? Of course we do, right? But where does the police budget come from? In any city, the police budget comes from taxpayers. Isn't that right? Everyone pays taxes, then hires police and builds police stations. So let's take New York as an example. New York's annual budget is 1,100 New York. The NYPD, New York Police Department's budget is $6 billion, which is 5.5% spent on maintaining public order. If we calculate the world's GDP using New York's ratio, 5.5% would be 6.4 trillion. But how much does the world actually spend on what we call maintaining security? Only 2.6 trillion is spent. When it should be 6.4 trillion, only 2.6 trillion is actually spent. Out of the total amount that should be spent, 40% is spent and 60% is missing. So what should the US share of global housing costs be? Everyone has their own reasoning depending on the standard used. If you look at it by population, with 347 million people, the United States should contribute about 4.7% of the world's housing expenses. If you go by economic size, then the United States should contribute 24% of the housing expenses. But today, the US is actually contributing 40% because the US has indeed provided a global share of these housing expenses. Up to today, the total is only 2.6 trillion, okay? The United States has contributed 40%. In other words, for example, as the international police, the US buys its own guns, buys its own uniforms, and even pays to maintain the police station and its branches. They build the buildings themselves, pay for their own gas, work to pay their own salaries just so they can survive. And then, whether everyone listens to this police officer's orders or not still depends on everyone's own decision. If you think about it, if the police in the city were treated like this, who would be willing to be a police officer, right? So from Trump's perspective, this kind of arrangement is unfair to America. Of course, if Trump doesn't speak out, then all of this is just considered perfectly justified, isn't it? It's been this way since 1945. But when Trump actually says it out loud, then everyone starts to wonder whether what he's saying makes sense or not. So I ask all of us, does Trump's perspective make sense? Let me help unpack his entire line of thinking for you. The situation is like this. The United States basically hasn't received any payment, almost no funding at all. No one has paid the U.S. any policing fees, nor have they paid any taxes. So the U.S. is acting as the world's policeman. Should the U.S. keep doing this indefinitely? For example, take the navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Everyone knows it's the U.S. handling it. What about the ships passing through there? It's not that the U.S. has no ships going through. The U.S. accounts for about 2 to 5% of them. These ships are related to the United States. However, these ships are sent to the U.S. for processing, and then they're sold to their final destinations. The U.S. can do this. They don't import any oil at all. They just earn a bit from processing fees. If you block the Strait of Hormuz, you're just cutting off this part for the U.S. The refineries just won't earn that processing fee, that's all. They'll just spend a bit more time refining. US-produced crude oil is enough, so actually the US doesn't really need any oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. The United States is the world's largest producer of both oil and natural gas. So, everyone, what do you think? Let's do a poll, shall we? Do you think what Trump said makes sense? Is doing this unfair to the United States? Or do you think this is how it should be, that the world should have such a leader? Since this leader is the richest, then you should pay for everything yourself. What is there to complain about? So, what do you all think? Does what Trump said make sense? That was my opinion at the time. There's an old Chinese saying that goes, give someone a bowl of rice and they'll be grateful. Give them a bushel and they'll resent you. If you help someone a little every day, they will definitely thank you. But if you give them a lot every day, it eventually becomes something they feel entitled to. If you stop giving them as much, they'll say, why have you changed? What's wrong with you? You become the target of their complaints, right? So this is just like the relationship between the United States and other countries around the world. This kind of relationship is especially true with Europe. Trump is now under pressure, trying to correct this situation. That's what's happening. Some people say, America, you have dollar hegemony. You can just print dollars and that's money. You can take a piece of paper and exchange it for real gold and silver. You buy things from countries all over the world, take advantage of them, and the world accepts it, right? So this is the world's compensation to you. What do you have to complain about? This kind of argument has always come from the Chinese Communist Party. Those are the views spread by the CCP or by people in mainland China, which I find very confusing. Those so-called famous commentators say things like, a $100 bill, it only costs half a cent, 0.5 cents to print. With a piece of paper, you can buy $100 worth of goods. We Chinese honestly make things and sell them to them, just to exchange for this piece of paper. So this is not just the world compensating the United States. America's relationship with the world is simply hegemonic. When people say things like this, it's indeed very easy to get people caught up in it. But is it really like this? If it truly were, why would the United States still need to issue national debt? If they need money and don't have enough, can't they just print a bunch of paper and be done with it? When have we ever seen the US lacking 2 aircraft carriers and just printing money to build them? Even during World War II, when the United States was at its most lacking, at the time when money was needed the most, when the US was fighting 2 wars in the Pacific and Europe, even then the US government issued bonds to the public to finance the war. They issued bonds, borrowing money from the people to fight the war. What does borrowing mean? It means you have to pay it back later. And the reason the US is trusted is precisely because there is always borrowing and repaying, never just printing paper money. It's treated like real gold and silver. Only then would people around the world truly respect the US and trust the US dollar. Let me take out a US dollar bill to show you all. Take a look. People believe in this piece of paper, but after all, it's just this piece of paper, you see? After 1972, when it was no longer pegged to gold, people were still willing to buy it. They hoard US dollars, recognize the US dollar, use it for transactions, and buy US Treasury bonds. That's because the United States doesn't act like those deceitful so-called experts in China claim it does. Isn't that right? Because after the US dollar was no longer backed by gold, what stood behind it was the credibility of the US government or the nation itself. And this credibility includes the assurance that they won't just print a few pieces of paper to plunder wealth. All the money the US government spends is accounted for as debt. If there's not enough money, it's recorded as debt. So when the Federal Reserve prints money, so-called quantitative easing, after easing, it will also implement quantitative tightening. The money it prints is not for the purpose of plundering wealth. It's simply to address an issue of money supply, the problem of the amount of currency in circulation. The distribution is spread out on average, although it's not perfectly even. But it is absolutely not the case that the United States is seizing the wealth of other countries around the world. All right, that's a pretty harsh statement for this whole topic. I'll talk more about this in the future. I just got inspired and digressed to this point. Okay, now let me get back to the main topic. Speaking of the split between the United States and Europe, I really think that the US and Europe will move toward a split after this war. However, this split, this rupture, will not become apparent on the surface. It won't be too obvious. Why? Because without the approval of the US Congress, first, Trump cannot withdraw from NATO, and second, he can't even remove US military bases from Europe. Because these major decisions are mostly made by Congress, and as of today, given the current situation in Congress, it's very difficult for them to make such decisions. He might not even be able to get full support within the Republican Party itself. However, Trump can significantly reduce the actual number of stationed troops and the resources actually committed. Then move them to East Asia to deal with the Chinese Communist Party, especially regarding Iran. In a war, the Chinese Communist Party could make moves behind the scenes to trap the United States. Would Trump really be unaware of this? So Europe would immediately face the problem of a defense vacuum. But actually, you can't really say there's any crisis, right? Why is that? Because Europe's biggest crisis comes from Russia, doesn't it? But because of that, Eastern Europe, so when Eastern Europe faces the Russian front lines, there are the three Baltic states, Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, as well as Romania and Ukraine. So there is a layer of buffer, right? Everyone, take a good look at this buffer zone. They are all former communist countries. Former communist countries when it comes to this kind of situation. They are extremely averse to the tyranny of communism or to Putin's kind of aggression. They absolutely do not want Russia to come again. How should I put it? To invade or trample on their territory again. So in fact, Europe has a natural barrier. This barrier, in other words, it is something gained after experiencing communist rule, an immunity. But from now on, Europe will definitely manage its own affairs, this is for sure. If Europe, or more precisely, if Britain, France, Germany, and Western Europe do not take charge, or do not have the ability to do so, then Eastern Europe, including the three Baltic states, Poland, Hungary, and even Ukraine, I think, let me just say one thing. My personal opinion is that all of them will gradually turn toward the embrace of the United States. This is my view, or you could say my prediction. Europe will no longer be a single bloc, so not to mention NATO being unable to hold together in the future. Even the EU may not be able to last. The world will move toward natural diplomatic relations. So what are natural diplomatic relations? More precisely, it means making friends again based on shared values. So at that time, if Western Europe doesn't change, this semi-socialist Western Europe has actually already diverged. It has parted ways with Trump's America, which upholds traditional values. This is why this time the plane couldn't land. This is the real reason behind it. So fundamentally, it's already just a facade of unity. So with this incident of the plane flying over this time, it has already reached this point. It has reached the stage where the unity is only superficial. So to put it more fundamentally, in my view, the tradition led by Trump in the process of America's strong comeback and revival, those in Europe who are unwilling to follow or can't keep up will be left behind and eventually abandoned. Now, speaking of this, actually, Trump doesn't just criticize anyone in Europe indiscriminately. He just posted another tweet. He said, Melania and I are very pleased to announce that Their Majesties the King and Queen of the United Kingdom will pay a historic state visit to the United States from April 27th to 30th. This visit will include a grand banquet, the state dinner held at the White House on the evening of April 28th. He said that this important moment this year will be especially significant because we will be celebrating our great nation, the 250th anniversary of its founding, and this year marks America's 250th birthday. Then Trump said, I look forward to spending time with the king, whom I respect greatly. This will be an exceptionally wonderful visit. So, as you can see, Trump is being very courteous to the King of the United Kingdom. Why do you all think that is? Type a couple more words. Why do you think that is? Take a guess. Let's all guess together. My guess might not necessarily be correct, but I'd like to share my own thoughts. While everyone is typing, if there are other viewers here, if you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to subscribe. Because as you can see, when I talk about the news, it's not just about the news itself. I also discuss what's behind the news. I hope we can look at things more in depth, so please subscribe and give a like. That way, YouTube can recommend this program to more countries. Here's how I see it. It's just that simple. Why does he respect the British royal family so much? As you know, from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles, Trump is very respectful of the British royal family in Europe. In fact, he respects all royal families a lot. Why? In my opinion, it's because the royal family doesn't represent European politics. Instead, it represents European tradition. Trump wants to return to tradition. If you agree, please give a like. If not, feel free to share your thoughts.